The early morning sun pokes the lazy pale blue waters of Lake Victoria as a new horizon opens up at Liabana Island in the deeper recesses of Buvuma Islands. The ambience is charming, but the landscape here continues to change. The recent rise in lake water levels, unseen in more than 50 years, pushed residents to the brink, while the main economic activity, fishing, is fast fading. Liabana, farthest east towards Kenya, is among the chain of 50 isles that make up Buvuma Islands. Travel is about 3.5 hours by boat from Buikwe district to the east, or via the main Buvuma Island, which is about 2 hours away. For many years, small-scale fishing and hand-hoe-based subsistence agriculture were the main economic activities around Buvuma, a backwater district with an estimated population of 90,000 people. The recent introduction of large-scale palm oil growing garnered some attention to Buvuma, but a better part of the population remains trapped in abject poverty. The tourism potential is for the most part untapped. At Liabana, once teeming with 4,000 residents, even with the poor water and sanitation, the island has only one toilet facility for all residents and is today a shadow of its former self. Authorities say about 2,000 people or less remained when the fishing business started fading. For centuries gone by, fishing was a preserve for the peasant communities in Uganda and Busoga around Lake Victoria and other communities around Lakes Choga, Edward, Albert and George, who mainly used primitive traditional gears such as spears, arrows and other crude fish capture methods, including capture by hands. At the turn of the last century, with the region under clutches of imperialists, foreign traders, including the British and Belgians, introduced new fishing technology of gill nets and other flax fiber materials. In the mid-1950s, foreign traders introduced Japanese nylon gill nets, which proved more effective and remain widely used to date. Around the same time, according to Ecology Journal published by Cambridge University, the British were puzzled that such the size of Lake Victoria, the largest on the continent, was mainly inhabited by very small species which the colonial fisheries managers could not find economic use for. That is when they transplanted both tilapia and Nile perch, originally native in Lake Albert, the Upper Nile and Lake Turkana in Kenya, into Lakes Victoria and Choga. The two species would later breed rapidly and proliferate across the lakes. Today, they form the bulk of the country's fish industry. Today, the industry is big business, one that has sucked in everyone from the ruling elite, businessmen and foreigners, Europeans, Indians and Chinese, to the peasant communities across the 21 districts bordering the major water bodies in the country. Between June 2020 and July 2021, according to Bank of Uganda data, at least 15,149 tons of fish worth $118.6 million or 419 billion Uganda shillings were exported, compared to 23,141 tons worth $146 million or 518 billion Uganda shillings that were exported between July 2019 and July 2020. Times have changed, says Edward Busulwa, a fishmonger and the LC1 chairperson for Liabana.
The undeniable fact is fish stocks have been dwindling during the last 3 years or so, which means heightened competition for the little available, and which partly explains why price for fish locally have been going up gradually. There is the small-scale fishers who mainly sell locally. Then there's the big players who operate large vessels and sell to the exporters. Each of the group is pulling in their direction. What the big players don't want is any competition. We suspect the proposed legislation is intended to kick many small-time players out of business.
We spent 2 days at the island, but Busulwa and other fishmongers we interacted with said the lake has since been taken over by powerful cartels.
We have two main problems here. that of the silverfish boat, which use large trawlers that scoops everything, including immature tilapia and the perch, and yet they always go unsuspected in the eyes of the authorities.
It is true the fish stocks have been reducing as the environment around us is changing. It's just like all the other animals. It can start by producing 1, 2, 3 offsprings and then none at all. Why should we think that fish would always be breeding? But in the context of what's happening, the fishery business has been hijacked and some people are simply untouchable.
This community had more than 4,000 people, but a majority have since left, and those remaining were born here, so we have nowhere else they know. The emergence of cartels, especially those with vessel trawlers for silverfish, has increasingly made life hard here.
The UPDF Fisheries Protection Unit was deployed on the lake in 2017 to fight immature fishing on the lake. Fish exports, which had dwindled sharply, began to rise as a result of the army patrols. However, the army has been accused of torturing those found with illegal fishing nets, and some of its officers have joined cartels involved in this lucrative trade.
Good idea initially, but because their bosses think they are doing a very good job to be looked at keenly, many have since lost focus when they learned that fish is lucrative.
There are many UPDF who abandoned what brought them here and are thugs. Not a day or two goes by without a fisherman returning and saying their fish was taken away. When someone is found engaging in illegal fishing, as they say, you'd expect that person to be arrested, but instead they take the fish.
The UPDF are a menace, stealing fish left and right. Sometimes, when we complain, we are told that those involved in such practices are retired soldiers, but they have uniforms without name tags. They just appear randomly, wielding guns, unmasked and unidentifiable. But where can they be reported anyway? The police here just can't do anything about it.
Salim Kasimbi, who heads the Fishery Association at Liabana, told NTV that government is partly to blame for illegal fishing practices.
Most of the fishing gear used in illegal fishing is not made in Uganda. It mostly comes from China. It is imported and cleared by both customs and the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, and winds up on the shelves in shops downtown Kampala, where those interested find it. So sometimes the argument made by our authorities are self-defeating, sometimes bordering on absence of common sense.
He said all attention is towards small-scale fishmongers, while the large-scale fishmongers, some propelled by top shots in government, are not held to account for their misdeeds.
I think the president is fed a lot of lies. They mostly accuse us, the small-scale fishers, as engaging in illegal fishing. But we have vessels on this lake, owned by the powerful, which do every illegal thing you know, and they go away untouched. Take, for instance, the silverfish trawlers, who have been causing havoc here in the years the president has been complaining. But no one touches them. They come at us instead.
When the Parliamentary Committee on Agriculture last month started debate on the Fisheries and Aquaculture Bill 2021, the islanders were shocked by the deliberations aired on radio. The Fisheries and Aquaculture Bill seeks to repeal the Colonial Fish Act of 1951, amended in 2011, to bring regulation of the industry up to date with current realities, among others to address excessive fishing pressure, growth in illicit fish trade, destructive fish malpractices, increasing local fish demand, and decreasing per capita fish consumption. And with large swaths of the lake taken over by the powerful, who have adopted new methods such as cage fish farming, the new bill, which had been on the shelf for the last 15 years, also seeks to regulate aquaculture, long regulated by the Aquaculture Regulations of 2003. The salient proposals in the bill are the conservation, sustainable management, utilization and development of the fisheries subsector, control and regulation of fishing activities, administration, management, coordination with local government and other stakeholders, and controversially, the licensing and registration of fishing vessels and other fishers. The bill, since reintroduction, has elicited mixed reactions, especially from Buganda and Busoga sub-regions, where the fishing industry and activities revolve. The Uganda Commercial Fish Farmers Association raised concerns about the double taxation regime already catered for in the fees being charged on fishing vessels. The Silverfish Association, whose members are a major concern among the small fishing communities, want deterrent measures against foreigners who trade in fish, while the Uganda Fish Processors and Exporters Association, in their 9 key point input to the draft bill, suggested among others stringent proper management of fish at landing sites for food quality, at landing sites for local and international consumers. Specifically, there have been calls for the new legislation to harmonize key issues like fishing methods, equipment, and fishing jurisdictions, which, if not well handled, will push peasant fishing communities out of the trade. But many fishmongers are already experiencing this test.
You ask me that if things are bad as we lament, why don't we leave? The answer is not simple. Sometimes you have to fight up to the last point. Remember, many of the people have been born and lived here all their lives, and fishing is all they know.
John Chikomeko sold everything he had to join the fish trade, but a recent drop in the fish stocks pushed him to the brink.
I once owned 2 boats, each with 30 gill nets, but they were all destroyed one day by the silverfish vessels who are untouchable. So imagine someone who was once self-employed. I'm not employed anymore. I was born in Buvuma, and it's the only place I know.
He, like Henry Sekaba, who had eked a living on the lake for the last 18 years, said they are not against regulations, but usually it tends to favor only a few, hence creating an unfair system.
Go and do a random sampling across all islands on the lake and others elsewhere. The fish business once employed many people, but increasingly life is being made hard. Sadly, many of us, it is not just business, it is a way of life, so we have nothing else to fall back onto.
If you create an unfair system, you push people to the brink. Regulation has never been bad at all. But in Uganda, there's a tendency of laws being made to target certain people and not everyone.
Sekaba told NTV that with the majority fishermen peasants, who form the largest part of the population, the proposed law should not seek to eliminate them from trade. The rise of foreign traders who export has created a monopoly, which is gradually edging out local players. The fish maw from the Nile perch is both lucrative business and a subject of contention. Foreign traders, specifically the Indians and Chinese, are interested in it mostly, but they want to determine the price. The government's policy blueprint, the National Development Plan, now in its 3rd edition, details fish as one of the 10 priority agriculture commodities to foster a sustainable agro-industrialization agenda, contributing an estimated 3% to national GDP. According to Makerere University's Department of Zoology, Entomology and Fisheries Sciences, College of Natural Sciences, the fish industry value chain employs an estimated 5.3 million people, up from 500,000 in the 1990s. But fish stocks have been dwindling. As of 2018, production from capture fisheries and aquaculture stood at 447,059 tons and 120,000 tons respectively. This left a deficit of 302,941 tons of capture fisheries and 888,000 tons of fish from aquaculture needed to achieve the government's target of increasing capture fisheries and aquaculture to 1.7 million tons annually by 2030. But amidst the zeal to regulate the industry, the government has long ignored critical issues such as the expansive pollution and wanton destruction of swamps which surround the shallow Lake Victoria waters and are the main breeding grounds of fish, especially tilapia and other small species. Regulation is in the right direction, but government could as well be shooting randomly and hoping to hit its targets later.